Welcome to Pauline's Africa live broadcasting. I am Sister Olga Masango from the Daughters of St. Paul. Today, I am bringing to you a special guest, Archbishop Hubertus Mateus Maria van Megen, Apostolic Nuncio to Kenya and permanent observer to United Nations Environment Program and Human Settlements Program. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Sister Olga.
And thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Your Excellency, on 26 April 2025, the Pauline's Africa audiovisual and marketing team were in Bura Shrine. We went there on a pilgrimage together with Pontifical Missionary Childhood and Pontifical Missionary Youth, that they had done their pilgrimage in honor of Cardinals. But above all, we went there to join them in this Jubilee year to share with them our experience as Paulines. There were thousands of children and young people, and in attendance, accompanied by their animators. It was also the day of the burial of the Pope. In fact, we prayed also for him. One of the animators asked us, after this burial of the Pope, the Cardinals will go to conclave, isn't it? I said yes. And then he continued, what is a conclave? Is it a house where the cardinal meets? Is not so? So please, Your Excellency, can you help us to enlighten more the people out there that the voice of God came through these young people that has asked us about the conclave?
Yeah, thank you, Sister. Thank you for that very interesting question. What is that now exactly, conclave? Actually, it comes from an Italian word, conclave, with the key. And what happened is that especially since late Middle Ages, the cardinals, at the moment they would meet to choose a new pope, a new holy father, they would be locked in, so conclave, with the key, under a key. In a sense, because what had happened is that in some of the meetings that had happened before, cardinals were delaying very much their decision on finding a new pope. A few times it happened that it was a few months. At a certain point, the people of Rome, because the conclave is always in Rome and within Vatican State, got so tired of it that they decided basically to lock up the cardinals and to tell them, listen guys, you will not come out of this before you have chosen a new pope. So that is where the expression comes from, conclave, conclave, with the key. Now the conclave as such is of course not a building, it's not a particular place, so to say, in Rome, though because of tradition of more or less 500 years, the conclave, the meeting of the cardinals in which they vote for the successor of Peter, is within the 16th chapel, which is part of Vatican City. Actually, the conclave goes even beyond that, because the institution of conclave does not only cover the 16th chapel, in which we have the votations, the votes only of the cardinals voting for a new pope, but it covers also the place where the cardinals are staying. The cardinals nowadays find a place to stay, a room in Santa Marta. If you would be in front of St. Peter Basilica, if you would be on St. Peter Square, and I know some of you have, then you would find on your right hand, a bit up there, you would find the 16th chapel, while on the left hand of St. Peter's Basilica, across a little street there, you would find Santa Marta. So what happens is that the cardinals every morning are taken from Santa Marta to the 16th chapel to do their voting. Keep in mind, by the way, and that is very strictly organized, that they are not allowed, in that entire time that they are in the conclave, which can take a day or two maybe, as it happened with the election of Pope Francis, as it happened with the election of Pope Benedict, but it could also take longer. I would not be surprised if this conclave takes maybe 3-4 days, maybe even 5 days. We do not know. That all this time, the cardinal electors have no access to their phones, to their mobile phones. They have no access to radio. They have no access to TV. So they have no access to internet. They are completely isolated from the world. They have no clue what is going on in those days in the world around them. They cannot and should not be influenced at this point from any opinion outside. And so even the people, and of course that will be needed, even the people who work with the cardinals at that point, maybe some assistant, let's say the driver of the bus who takes them from Santa Marta to 16th Chapel, or maybe 2 or 3 doctors who are always there, or maybe a few priests who are there always to hear confessions, or maybe there is a cardinal who is not doing so well, he needs to be pushed in his wheelchair. All these people, the cooks, the cleaning people, they all have an oath of secrecy, and they are not allowed to speak to the cardinals. The cardinals are only allowed to speak to each other. Anybody else has to keep out of this. All this is, so to say, covered by the secrecy of the conclave. So the conclave is not a place in itself. It is an institution of rules governing the election of a pope.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. What are the procedures for electing a pope?
Well, I hinted a bit at it already. So it was now very recently decided that the conclave will start on the 7th of May. There is a apostolic constitution, Regimini Dominici, what is it called? I've lost the name now. See, the sister knows it better than me at this point. That the conclave should start between 15 to 20 days after the death of the Holy Father. So the 7th of April depends a bit on how you count, but it is surely within that period of 15 to 20 days. What will happen then on next Wednesday, the 7th of April, is that the cardinals will have to do their oath of secrecy, that they are not allowed to divulge anything that was said during the conclave or the way the votations went, even on a penalty of excommunication. So if a cardinal reveals anything that is happening in the conclave, or the way the discussions went, or the way the votations went, because probably you need a number of votations to get to a new pope, that cardinal could be excommunicated from the church. That same is true for other people who might be circling around there. Keep in mind, by the way, that in the 16th Chapel itself, once it comes to the votation on a new candidate, on a new pope, nobody else is present except the cardinals. There's no doctor, there's no priest, there's nobody. However, of course, as it goes, the cardinals among themselves, before they go into that space, or when they come out, they discuss among themselves and saying, this votation went like this or that, and this candidate, I'm not very much in favor of it. Then you have the people who, let's say the cook, the one who serves the food, the doctor, one of the priests, he may overhear those kind of conversations. That is inevitable at a certain point. But they are also bound by an oath of secrecy. Also, these people will have to make an oath of secrecy that same day, that Wednesday, before the conclave starts. So we do all these different oaths that need to be done, also within the 16th chapel, even for priests and lay people who are in one way or another involved. And then that same evening of the 7th of April, normally it will come to a first round of votation. At a certain point, the Pontifical Master of Ceremonies will pronounce these famous words, extra omnes, everybody out, it means, so that people have to get, all those who are not directly involved in the conclave, who are not a cardinal, cardinal elector. By the way, cardinal elector means you have to be younger than 80 years and you should not have reached your 80th year before the death of the Holy Father, right? And if you're older, Paula, you're not going to be part of this select gremium. But so all these people need to be out, doors are closed, are locked, and then we do the first voting on a candidate. Yes, even that is done in a very elaborate way, in a sense that before the voting starts, there are appointed or voted in scrutiny. These are the people who are going to count the votes. They are normally like 3 cardinals, or among those cardinals who will count the votes. At the same time, they need to appoint what they call infirmari. These are people, again, cardinals, who may go, for example, as a cardinal, and that happens, of course. I mean, some of these cardinals are relatively old. If you get over 70, and so you might be getting a flu, or you might not feel well. You might not be able to directly vote. An infirmari, that is a kind of a nurse, you might even say, is going to the particular person to get his vote and bring it back. Then, after that, there's still a third group of people, once again of 3, who are voted in by the cardinals, who check once again on all the votes. So there are like 2 filters to see whether this voting was now done in a correct way. If then, which you might expect in a first round, a second round, it has not come to a satisfying result, that means a 2/3 majority. If it is true that I think at the moment, what is it, 133 cardinals are going to participate in the conclave, that would mean that about 88 cardinals should vote in favor of a certain candidate in order to have a 2/3 majority. However, if you don't reach those 88, those papers, because it's all done by hand, we don't have any electronic voting, are collected and they are burnt. And they add a certain substance to it so that the smoke will be black. Once, however, there is a positive vote in the sense that a 2/3 majority has been reached and has gone over that, so a new pope is elected, and the candidate has been asked whether he is ready to accept that votation, and he has answered in the affirmative, then those papers are also burned, but with a substance added to it so that the smoke is white. That is in short, because it's even a bit more complicated, the voting process.
Yes, very good. So the white smoke ends the voting, the conclave.
Yes. So adding to that maybe, normally in the mornings there are 2 rounds of voting. Then again in the afternoons, late afternoons, again 2 rounds of voting. Normally, if the voting had not been successful, the papers of those 2 rounds are collected and burned together, so you have one black smoke in the morning, you would have another black smoke in the evening at about 7 o'clock normally. However, if in one of those voting rounds a candidate comes out and a new pope is elected, then immediately we announce this to the world by the white smoke. And what has been added, by the way, in the last election of a pope in 2013 with Pope Francis, a church bell is rung of the St. Peter Basilica in order to confirm, so to say, that the smoke is really white. Because especially in the evening at times it's difficult to see whether the smoke is black or white. Yes.
Very good. Before we go to the legacy of Pope Francis, Your Excellency, out there, the Christians, some Christians, speak of interim Pope. Is really in the, have we in the Catholic Church really an interim Pope?
Of course we do.
Interim Pope?
Yeah, of course we do not have an interim Pope because a Pope needs to be elected by the College of Cardinals. People probably, when they speak of an interim Pope, they speak of the Camerlengo, the Chamberlain, as one might say even in English. And that Cardinal Farrell, in this case, was already appointed by Pope Francis. What a Chamberlain, what a Camerlengo does is he takes care of the running affairs of the Church, and especially way of Vatican City and the Curia. Also keep in mind, by the way, that at the moment a Pope dies, all the higher offices, that means all the prefects, all the presidents of different commissions, of dicasteries, that is, of ministries, they all lose their jobs, so to say. They are suspended for a while. They are suspended till a new Pope comes in, who then confirms them, or does not confirm them, back into their position. For us, thanks be to God, for Nuncio that's not the case. I'm still full in power and can continue to rule. And but what I wanted to say is that, so the interim Pope, that does not exist. We have a Camerlengo who, you may say, keeps the shop open, but he's not allowed to buy anything else, and he's not allowed to sell anything in a sense. He just keeps the door open so people can come in, he can answer questions if there are doubts, but otherwise nothing.
Very good. Excellency, what legacy did Pope Francis leave to the Universal Church? And more specifically to Africa. You had the chance to interact with the Pope Francis, especially in preparing the visit to South Sudan. Also, it was during your term in South Sudan that the leaders, they met Pope Francis. So, what is the legacy?
Yes, I think what you bring up is a very important point, the question of, and the way you connected it to South Sudan. What Pope Francis had very much was the feeling that God is present in his people. There's a famous saying in Latin which says, Vox Populi, Vox Dei. The voice of the people is the voice of God. In a sense, that was very much present in Pope Francis. He felt very much that what the people as a people were thinking and feeling, in that God is present. And on the other way around, by serving the people, and if I say people, I'm not talking now about, so to say, the ministers or the millionaires, but the poor and the working class, people who are struggling to survive every day. By serving them, this Pope was very much aware of the fact that in serving them, he was serving Christ himself, which is, of course, very evangelic, very gospel truth, but he lived that to the full. And you might even think, again, when he came to South Sudan, and you may remember in 2019, we had this, what they called a little retreat, I would say, in the Vatican with President Salva Kiir, with Vice President Riek Machar, with the other vice presidents who were present in that meeting, that he kissed the feet of the leaders of South Sudan. There was this twofold meaning maybe in the kissing them, so as to say, I humble myself in front of you, trying to convince you, do something, bring peace to this country, stop fighting, you are the leaders of this country, you know, and I beg you. I go even on my knees for you to do this. That was typically Pope Francis. But also partly it was, in kissing you, I kiss the feet of the people of South Sudan in which Christ is suffering. That was also part of it. So I think, and that was also his desire over all these years, and it then only happened in 2023 because in between there was COVID. Then at a certain point we had to postpone at the last moment because Pope Francis was not feeling well. But then in 2023 in February he finally came, and that had been a desire of his over all these years, and each and every time again you would meet him, it was about that. But it's very much about what in Argentina and Latin America they would call el pueblo. It was about the people and God who's present in the people. That is something which was very strong in Pope Francis. And you could see it also even in Rome, the way he would go and visit the prisoners, the way he would go and visit the sick, the way he would try to meet, he would even invite the beggars for a Christmas dinner or Christmas lunch, beggars there around St. Peter's Square, and if you go there, you know there are plenty of them. That was typically him. He wanted to be with the poor, he wanted to be with the excluded. And I think I've said it also somewhere else, that a biography came out, an autobiography came out at the beginning of this year, Spera, on Pope Francis, which explains also a bit his background. He being from an Italian immigrant family, they had come from northern Italy to Argentina before the birth, by the way, of little Jorge at that point. And he was very much aware of that history, I have to correct myself, of his grandparents who had come from Italy. And so he felt very much that he was part of that family that descended from immigrants who themselves had to leave behind their home country and who were considered to be outcast, low caste in Argentina and had to start from scratch. And he felt very much that he was part of those people. And I think that is something which determined his whole legacy as a pope. He was very much influenced by that identity and feeling.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now, can you give us your parting shot for the Church, for the society today?
Coming back on that legacy of Pope Francis, I mentioned it also in my homily during the Requiem Mass for the Pope last week, Friday. When somebody passes on, is not among us anymore, sometimes you understand him better than when he was alive, because the person who leaves us and who dies, he leaves a kind of a void behind. And in that void, in that experience of that emptiness, you understand more the meaning of that person in your life. The meaning of Pope Francis was that he wanted to be with the poorest of the poor, that he wanted to serve those who are at the fringes of society. He himself would always speak of periphery. He wanted to surrender himself completely. And if you look to his life, and especially now, I think even the way he died, this man, Pope Francis, gave himself completely to the world, gave himself completely to the church, till there was nothing more to give. Like Christ himself did. He gave himself, gave his body and blood to us till there was nothing anymore to give. Pope Francis really stepped into those footsteps. And I do think that is the vocation of all of us, to do that same thing, to leave everything behind, to be of service. You know, service, I think, many times, even in Kenya, we forget about it, even within the church, many times we rather be served than serve. But the vocation, which is typically Christian, is to serve, and to serve each and everyone, especially those who are not served by anyone, the outcast, the prisoner, the oppressed, the prostitutes, the drugs addicts, all those people who basically we don't even want to have to do something with. If we start with them, as Pope Francis would do, if we would be able to really step over our own shadows and our own boundaries, if we really would be ready to give ourselves completely, then we could make this society in the most beautiful society of Africa and the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Archbishop Hubertus Mateus Maria van Megen is with us as a guest. In these 9 days, within these 9 days in which we are praying for the repose of the soul of Pope Francis. Thank you very much for being accompanying us to Pauline's Africa live broadcasting. See you again next time. Bye-bye. I am Sister Olga Masang, and I would like to thank the technical team, Sister Agatha Chipul, Daughter of St. Paul, Monica, Duncan, and Timothy. Thank you very, very much. Bye-bye. See you next time.